Hey, Operabox Score fans, this is George Cedarquist with a quick amendment before we get to the show. So as you know, we normally tape on Monday nights. And of course, as sometimes happens in this business, the very day after we tape the show, we get big news from Opera Philadelphia with the announcement that Anthony Roth Costanzo, general director at Opera Philadelphia, has just announced that very Tuesday a program called Pick Your Price. It's a new initiative where every seat for the coming season in Opera Philadelphia starts at $11. It also includes a higher price of your choosing, but ultimately every ticket is going to be starting at $11. We're going to talk about it more on the show in the weeks to come. We want to make sure we got that news out there just as soon as possible. $11, I mean, that's basically the price of one of those dreadful Philly cheesesteaks, right? Enjoy the show.
You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm Weston Williams, joined by Oliver Camacho and Ashley Hardgrave. All right, next month, friends of the show, Opera Philadelphia will present the North American premiere of Missy Mazzoli and Royce Vavrek's The Listeners, and we go inside the huddle with the opera's star, soprano Nicole Heaston. And then, in the final inning of OBS Season 9, we peek into the Listener Mailbag. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, Angelina Jolie goes method and swallows a tapeworm to prepare her portrayal of La Divina. I don't think we can legally say that, but that's the joke. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify. Click follow. On Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign. Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes, mailbag@operaboxscore.com. Or you can just record your thoughts using the You Got Something to Say tab on our website, operaboxscore.com. However you contribute, you'll get an OBS beer coaster, an OBS lapel pin, and a #1 OBS fan foam finger, just for sharing your own hot take. It's good to be back here in the driver's seat here, doing an absolutely flawless, rendition of the opening without any edits whatsoever.
Crushing.
Oliver, what's your tennis update for me?
Well, today is the first day of the U.S. Open, and so it means that I don't know if I might just have to quit my job because it's too many matches to watch. And finally, during a time I don't have to get up, at 7:00 to watch a match. I can actually just watch it in real time. But real time happens to be during my working day. And so yeah, I'll be looking for a new job in 2 weeks, everybody.
Ashley, are you looking for a new job as well? Perhaps in politics?
I'm not, although I probably could have gotten one after all of the fancy people that I rubbed elbows with. No sports for me this week because I am still in a full Democratic National Convention hangover. America, I volunteered to help out with the Democratic National Convention, and then I also, through some very bizarre here's the thing. I have decided that I am the Forrest Gump of the Democratic National Convention because through things that I cannot explain, I have ended up in situations in the same space as people that I had no business being there. So I was at an Axios event with the governor of New York, and then I accidentally stumbled into a reception where the Johns of Crooked Media, Favreau and Lovett were. And then I also ended up getting to use a friend's pass to go into the United Center on Tuesday, where I got to see Barack, Michelle, and everybody's favorite uncle, Doug. So it's been a wild week of getting all of the preparation, wild 2 weeks actually, getting all the preparations ready. I was on visibility ops, so all of those signs that you saw, I helped create those. And then I was also on wayfinding and hospitality. So I, over the weekend before the convention, was helping delegates either find taxi cabs or find the train station. I am so excited for our city for having such a wonderful event and having more people fall in love with what we already know is an incredible city with incredible people and culture. I'm also glad they're gone so we get our city back and we can take public transit at a normal speed.
Yes, I wanted to get downtown at one point, but I was detained by the Secret Service, which was unfortunate.
Just for being tall,
but,
right?
I busted out. I'm on the run,
Yeah.
It's totally fine.
Tall,
this is coming from an undisclosed location is where I'm recording this episode. So let's go ahead and, before the Secret Service finds me, talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go Inside the Huddle.
Next month, Opera Philadelphia, our friends in Philadelphia, will present the North American premiere of Missy Mazzoli and Royce Vavrek's The Listeners. And we have their star, Chicago native Nicole Heaston. Before we dive into this interview, let's hear a little bit of Nicole in one of her signature roles, Handel's Alcina. This is from a performance at the Royal Danish Opera. Nicole Heaston, welcome to Opera Box Score.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited for this.
So this is at the very beginning of the rehearsals of The Listeners, and we're definitely going to get to the topic of Missy Mazzoli's The Listeners at Opera Philadelphia. But I just want to begin by introducing you to the audience as a singer that to me is very fascinating. If you look at, your CV, you see And True Love, you see some Mozart roles like Zerlina, and you've done, I think, Donna Elvira as well in Don Giovanni, and Contessa. And those roles all sort of feel, of a part. But then you do a little more investigating and you see things like Liu in Turandot and Mimi. And, there's that begins to get more like full on lyric and less, light lyric coloratura. And now you're singing things like Highway 1, the William Grant Still opera. And it feels like your calling card role is going to be this role in The Listeners, which is, I feel like it's written for you. So I don't know, like how we, yeah. So can you help the audience understand how you see your voice type?
Yes. I'm a very strange hybrid of a singer. I started out I grew up in Chicago, and when I was young, I was in the Chicago Children's Choir. And in the choir, I was a second alto, which was the lowest of the female voices. And I loved being that part because I had a chance to go on all the concerts because it was only 8 of us compared to 30 sopranos in the soprano section. But when I started going to high school, my high school teacher said, no, you're actually a soprano. And she opened up that venue of me singing. So when I started singing in college, I was a soprano who had a very strong middle and low because I had sang low from my childhood on up. So once I got a little older, my repertoire was so strange because I could sing Glitter and Be Gay, but I didn't sing Queen of the Night. I sang Pamina. And when I was trying to find an agent, so many people were like, I don't understand who you are. How can you do these high songs, but then you can sing the, more, Ina Etas. And I'm like, I'm just a light lyric with extension, and that was the way I tried to explain myself. So my agent that I ended up getting, he was the one person that understood who I was. But opera being opera, I had to be put in a box. And that was doing the Susannas and the Nanettas and the light lyric, which was great for me because it kept my voice in a good
healthy,
state and healthy. Then I got pregnant with my first child. And when that happened, the voice began to fill out just a little bit more. Then my second child filled out a little bit more to the point where I went to an audition and they were like, you don't need to be singing Susanna anymore. You need to be singing the Countess. It's time for you to become a big girl, Nicole, become a lyric. So I started doing that, but I also, before that, was singing Baroque music. And I worked with Mark Minkowski in the beginning parts of my career. And he told me it's not just straight tone singing, it's full bodied singing with using straight tones and different type of affects to make emotional connections to the text. So I carried that on with me the bigger my voice got. So I could still sing Baroque music. Now I sing more of the crazy witches like Alcina, but I sing it fuller than most sopranos do. And my thing is that I like to sing when I like to sing. And now that I've gotten older, like I just did Thais, which, you know, is a role that not a lot of sopranos are able to sing. And you got to sing that high D. Believe me, a lot of people mentioned it. And you know, and I can do that, but I can also sing things like Highway 1, which are a little bit lower in context. So I find myself to just be this hybrid singer who has the high, has the low. I sing with the same voice all the time. So I don't put myself in a box anymore, which I'm very happy about because it just makes my life that much more interesting.
I agree. And I'm so glad you brought up Mark Minkowski and you brought up the word affect and you brought up the idea of colors and using vibrato as a choice, not necessarily as like the only technique, you know. And that is something that I think is so in Handel. It invites you to give so many different colors and affects. You know, some of these characters have like 8 arias to sing in the course of an evening, and you can't use the same color for
You can't even use the same color in the same aria. Every aria is at least 10 minutes long. If you give the same color for that one aria, you're going to have the entire audience asleep. So you got to use every trick in your toolbox to make those songs come alive, because you're saying the same words over and over again, but they have to mean something different every time. And if you use a straight tone here, if you sing a piano loud, if you do, it's just everything is different. And I think really and honestly, my work with Baroque music helped me color how I approach anything else I sing as well.
There's often a parallel between people who do new music and early music, because they figured out, you know, there's so many options we have. And when you sing just straight bel canto, or if you like become like a Puccini singer, you tend to get into this everything warm, everything legato, everything long phrases mentality, at which there are some people who do that. And yes, it's so beautiful, you know, give it to me. But it's not necessarily the most interesting thing.
That's true. And that's why people who do it really, really well and make it interesting are in a whole another class.
Yes.
It is hard, you know?
Yeah.
It's hard.
No, that makes me so happy. Can you talk a little bit about your experience as an American singer who finds herself in Europe and being in demand, you know, in places that not a lot of Americans, you know, are invited?
I have been very lucky in my career to have a very fruitful relationship with the European houses. It's so interesting going over there because a lot of the times, especially in the first part of my career, I would be the only African-American person there. Mm-hmm. And not just African-American, African.
The only Black person.
Sometimes even in the whole entire town, like that they knew who I was every day. You know, I loved that experience because I got a chance to interact with so many different cultures and seeing how those cultures actually, you know, brought their sensibilities towards opera. You know, of course, when you're in Italy, you know, they believe that it's their art form. So when you're there with them, you're learning so much from them about the language. In France, you get a whole different, you know, way of thinking because they color the music differently than even the Italians and the Americans do. I love the fact that I have a career that takes me to all these different places and the people I've met. And the best thing about actually opera in Europe is that it's so appreciated there. So it's always fantastic to actually be singing at a full house. Yeah. And a full house right. It's not all white hair. It's young. You know, it's such a diverse audience, and I have to say it's growing a little bit more in the States. I am seeing more diversity in the audience as far as age, but in Europe, you know, that's date night, you know, for a young couple. It's a wonderful thing.
Well, I mean, there's many reasons why, you know, opera is more part of the mainstream culture. I mean, mainly because they don't have to sell tickets in order to survive. so they can do more interesting things. But I feel like, we have this conversation all the time. Like there are these companies that really take it far with the director's vision of a show that is so far away from the opera that it becomes more about the director's vision than the opera itself. And I don't know if that's good for opera either. And that stuff definitely wouldn't fly in the US. And with American companies, like the budgets are so tight that it's to take a risk on something like that. You don't really see it, which is what makes Opera Philadelphia such a special company. And I promise we're going to get to it in a second. But can you talk, since we are going to talk about the listeners, can you talk about your relationship with Den Norska and how that began and how you became like a star over there? I mean, you got to sing Popeye over there, which is, I mean, what a role,
Yes, I think the first thing I did there was Alcina, actually in Oslo, and it was the funniest audition because I went to New York for an audition for the opera company, and the intendant was there. And I looked at their rep list, and they didn't have Alcina on there. And I was like, why am I auditioning for these people? I said, I'm not doing anything that's coming up soon. And my agent was like, no, just sing for them. And so I sang, I think, Depuis le jour. And at that point, I used to always sing Cleopatra's aria from Julius Caesar, Se Pietà. So I walked past the intendant at the end of my audition. He said, do you know Alcina? And I was like, no, but I have a score at home waiting for somebody to pay me to learn it. And he said, okay, I'll do that. And I went, and it was the most rewarding experience I have ever had in my career to that point. There was a freedom to the piece. It was the people who I was working with, the conductor, the director. I'd never been so in sync with a creative team like that before. And it was a huge success in Oslo. They invited me back later to do the Countess in the Marriage of Figaro, and that was a fantastic production as well. But then the next time they brought me back was The Listeners, and that was a special experience because that was a piece that was written by Missy, with me in mind. She called me and said, how do I write this for you? You're the person I want for this. And to create that in that space was just a wonderful thing.
We are going to talk about The Listeners right now, but that production of Alcina, some of the video with all these like half naked men like clawing at you.
Yeah, come on, Alcina.
So The Listeners, how does someone write a role for you? What are the things that you wanted to show? What is like your style guide for composing for Nicole Heaston?
Well, this was the first time this had ever happened. And Missy is such a wonderful collaborative artist. She literally sent me like maybe a 3 or 4 page document with all these questions. What's the highest note you feel comfortable singing? What songs are your favorite songs to sing? What arias do you like to sing? Where do you feel most comfortable in your middle voice? She had every question under the sun for Nicole's voice, stuff that I hadn't even tapped into or thought about for myself. And she took that and then put it on paper in her own voice. And there were a couple of things where I would look and I'm like, oh, I don't know about this. And I was like, how do I approach this? She's the composer. She wrote this. I don't want to act like I'm not appreciating her work, but this doesn't necessarily work for me. I emailed her. She said, okay, give me a few minutes. And an hour later, it was changed. And I was like, wow. And even when we were rehearsing in Oslo, we realized that my character and the character of Angela, we were dramatically missing something. So she wrote us 2 arias, just like that.
Is Angela your daughter?
No, Angela is not my daughter. She is one of she's the second assistant, the first assistant to the cult leader.
Okay. Howard, is that his name?
Howard Bard, yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, we're going to talk to Missy later on, so we'll get a little bit more about The Listeners specifically. But what are the things that you wanted her to know? Like, this aria fits me like a glove. If you can write something that, that sings like this, then you're on the right path.
I wanted something that was visceral, something that was emotionally transformative and actually had something to say. And, and I let her know, I was like, I like to sing high, but I don't want to necessarily live there. Mm-hmm. And I kind of gave her some of the things that I really like to sing just for her to have a point of reference. And she really took that and just, knocked it out the park. Like my first scene, it's just me and this coyote, dancing around me and me talking to a coyote. And I remember I was like, oh my gosh, how's this going to work? And it does. And I love the character of Claire, because very rarely do you find a character who is a middle-aged woman, even a middle-aged woman of color that, is having her story told that has nothing to do with her color. And it's just about her just being a woman with a family. And she's hearing this sound that she can't understand. And she wants to know why she is going through this, and no one else can hear her, can hear the hum besides her, except for these few select people that suck her into this cult. And it was so abstract and so crazy and so new. It was a wonderful experience. And I'm so glad to actually get a chance to do it again with different artists, because it'll bring different characteristics out of Claire, my character.
So you've already done it in Oslo, and the whole thing, for whatever reason, is up on YouTube for people to see. I don't know how long it'll be there, but we're going to link to it so people can watch, because the production in Oslo looks so expensive. Is that the same production that they're bringing to Philadelphia?
They are.
Wow. It looks like a movie set. It looks incredible. And the transitions are really, really like just engaging. I want to watch all of these transitions.
And let me tell you, those transitions were hysterical, because that first whole scene, once I come on stage, I rarely leave. So the minute I'm finished, I'm running around to the other side of the set, like stripping behind the like the set, trying to change, and all of a sudden I'm in the classroom. So it's very seamless, but it's like behind the scenes, it's like, chaotic. You're not seeing how the biscuits are being made, you're just seeing the fluffy biscuits.
I want to ask if you feel like working with Missy on this show, there is a distinctly feminine perspective. If you could put your finger on what makes it a feminine collaboration. I have my own ideas about it, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll hear what you have to say.
It's a feminine spin on this, because this is all really coming from her point of view. It's not being projected onto me by my husband. It's not being projected onto me by Howard. Howard has his own storyline, but this is really her story. It's Angela's story as well. It's so female-based, where the things that are happening to us are things that we are instigating to happen, and our reactions to it.
So you're coming to Chicago to do this opera in the spring. And if I'm not mistaken, somehow it's your debut with lyric opera?
Isn't that shocking?
so upside down. Like, here's this star, like, that has made her bones all over the place and, clearly have a very special quality. And it's taking this work to bring you here. I mean, I'm glad it's happening, but who do I complain to about this?
I don't know. Like the world? I don't know. I have been wanting to work at the Chicago Lyric forever. I mean, my father has sat there and seen me have a lot of successes, but none of it meant anything until I said, I'm coming home to sing at the Lyric. Because that's at home, and him and my mother can brag on their daughter in front of their friends. So I'm so excited. I mean, my high school friends are coming, my sorority sisters are coming. I've got the Chicago Children's Choir people are coming. Everybody's like, oh, she's finally coming home. And it's been so long in the making. And I'm glad to come with this piece, because so many of the people who want to come see it because I'm in it are friends of mine, have never really gone to the opera before. So I'm excited that they're going to come and see something in English that's set in an American setting. So there's no barriers for them to say, it was good. I didn't know what they were really saying. They're not going to get any of that. They're going to get it raw and understand exactly everything that's going on, which is very cool.
I've had this come up with other artists who made their debuts in new works. And it sounds like you're enthusiastic about that. You feel that, the work is strong enough and the language barrier is not there. But don't you wish that people could hear you sing, Liu or Alcina or Mimi in Chicago?
Well, there's always time. Like I said, You say, who do I call? Call the Lyric and tell them that's what they need to do.
Yeah.
People can hear that.
We did get a taste of your artistry in Chicago during the pandemic when you did a concert. I think was it a radio concert only for Elgin with, yeah. And I think you sang the Blessed Virgin's Expostulation.
Yes.
The person, I love that thing.
I love it too. I was so excited I got a chance to perform that.
Okay. So anything you'd like to say about Chicago for our Chicago audience? Do you have any sports allegiances or something that you can't wait to return to, like a food thing in Chicago? I don't know how long it's been since you've been here.
Well, my parents still live there. So I'll just say this. Every time I come home, 3 musts are 3 wings, salt, pepper, and mild sauce from Harold's Chicken on 53rd Street, Giordano's Pizza, and Garrett's Popcorn. I don't care what's going on in my life. Those 3 things will happen. As far as my sports allegiance, it will always be the Bulls. Because I grew up in Chicago during that 1993 stretch where Michael Jordan was like dominating the Bulls. So I don't care if the Bulls do bad, good, whatever. I'm a Bulls fan. And the Bears, yes.
Good. You don't have to carry the shame of the White Sox right now.
Well, and it's weird because I grew up on the South Side. I grew up in Hyde Park. And we grew up as White Sox fans because we were on that side of town. My sister then moved to the North Side, and now she's a Cubs fan. And that's all she talks. So, like, we're a house divided on that one.
Nicole Heaston, the Listeners opens up very soon at Opera Philadelphia. I'll know the date by the time I finish this episode. And then we might be able to replay this interview again when you make it to Chicago to do it a third time. Thank you so much for being a guest on Opera Box Score.
Thank you for having me.
A little sample of the first scene of Missy Mazzoli and Royce Vavrek's The Listeners. That is available on YouTube. The whole thing is available on YouTube. At least it is today. We'll see if it is after this podcast comes out. But we'll put a link to it on the show notes at operaboxscore.com.
Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, click follow on Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign. You know, I'm so excited to see The Listeners here in Chicago. It can't come soon enough, honestly. I've been waiting for more Missy Mazzoli in our town. But, you know, on the subject of Chicago, Ashley, you know, you're the expert now. You have introduced so many DNC candidates to our great city. What do you have any sportsy recommendations for Chicago-y things going on in the zone around you?
I sure do. This might be one of the only times I'm able to say this in upcoming months, but the Bears are undefeated. They are undefeated
Shocking.
in preseason. They are also getting a lot of attention because they are the current stars of the ESPN series Hard Knocks. It's very charming. Again, to throw it back to the DNC one last time. So the last Bears preseason game was this past Thursday, which is also the final night of the Democratic National Convention that is being broadcast and televised nationwide. And so my friend and I went to go watch that last day of addresses in the evening, and we went into this bar where it was just like littered with TVs. It's a hockey bar, but they had everything turned on to DNC. And this couple came in and they were going to watch the Bears game. And they asked the server, hey, which TV is the game on? And the server said, what game? That's how like over the top this coverage has been. So what eventually happened is they turned one television on to the Bears and Chiefs preseason game where we were playing, the Super Bowl champions. And then we beat them because everybody was playing their third string folks, but I digress. So the two TVs side by side was the Bears game and the Democratic National Convention. But yes, for right now, America, as you hear us, the Chicago Bears are undefeated.
You know what else is undefeated? Listener Mailbag.
Yeah, you got something to say? Then yeah, all right, you can say something. This is Listener Mailbag.
Well, hello, operaboxscore. This is Miriam, longtime listener, first-time poster, and I'm calling in here during the intermission of La Traviata at the Santa Fe Opera. I am standing next to the bust of Igor Stravinsky on one of the terraces, and it's a perfect night to be here, unlike the last two nights, which were also Santa Fe staples, the dark and stormy night. But tonight is lovely and it's beautiful here, and I'm so happy that I came. I was kind of debating about coming to La Traviata because I've seen it a few times, but I must say that Manet, I'm going to mess up her last name, Ganoyan, I'm sorry. She is a revelation, and I'm so happy to be hearing her for the first time tonight. It's just a fantastic portrayal of Violetta, and I'm loving the set. They put it on their revolving stage, and especially during the first act when it was still somewhat light outside, as the set revolved, it revealed one of the most special things about Santa Fe, which is the amazing open-air backdrop and the scenery behind the scenery, so the real scenery, the landscape. And as the set revolved, it revealed that, and it was really lovely. I'm looking forward to the second act of La Traviata here at Santa Fe Opera. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you so much to Miriam. I love hearing multiple voices. Once again, you can send us your voice memos or any hot takes at mailbag@operaboxscore.com. You can also use the You Got Something to Say tab on our website, operaboxscore.com.
Just a reminder, Miriam, that Manet was our guest on Opera Box Score right as they were in rehearsal for that Traviata. So look back in the archive and enjoy that interview with Manet. And she'll be coming to Chicago to sing Gilda in Rigoletto, which opens next month here in Chicago. So maybe you want to come down and see her do that, and we'll get a something together. Drink alcohol? I don't know, Miriam.
We have another listener mailbag, this time in text form, that we've been sitting on for a little while for various reasons.
I'm going to read some of it. It's long, but it's from Zara in New York. I wonder if you could point me to an episode you might have done in the past on girls being admitted to cathedral choirs that have traditionally excluded them. I was so excited to hear that there would be boy choir girl power in this week's 2-minute drill, and so sure that it would also be a good call at the end of the episode. When I found it was, and I thought you might have done an earlier treatment of the issue, since per the article you helpfully included in your website, this story has progressed in stages over a couple of years. If you could share that with your listeners, or at least with me, and if you haven't, I'd love to hear more on the podcast about this news, how this victory was fought for and won, and what it means. I'd like to think there might have been more musical and educational opportunities for girls like me and not like me around the world over the past 900 years. High-level training, scholarships, friendships, if this venerated tradition had been gender inclusive for, a bit longer. I know there are many girls' choirs and mixed choirs nowadays, and that we're talking about some last bastions here, but I'd love to get your takes. With much gratitude for you all, Zara in New York.
Well, there's also a little more of this that didn't get read, Oliver, and it's a shout out to me. So guess what? We're reading it. I also know you treat topics that are maybe more opera adjacent, strictly operatic, like this one, in a very engaging way. Segment on marching bands. Who did that? Who, of course, to be fair, were playing opera arrangements, was a delight, for example. And I would eagerly listen to Ashley talk about whatever she liked. Thank you, girl. Loving you. Which is one reason, there's the transition, I was so pleased to hear her open this week's episode. I adore each of you and welcome the flowers in the spring with each new episode drops. In case you've ever wondered whether it makes a difference to a female listener to hear the one female host introducing the show, I want to cast my vote for it does, with much gratitude.
And there I'm trying to erase it.
I can't believe that Oliver deliberately did not read that paragraph.
I mean, the gaslighting, Oliver.
There's so many questions in this, so we have to
No, there are.
answer
But
some.
first of all, thank you, Zara, for all of this, because this is exactly why we do this. These are the types of conversations we want to facilitate with our audience, with our listeners, with fellow opera lovers, with fellow classical music lovers. You're doing it right. That's my takeaway. And not just because you were very nice and kind to me in your comments. But to get back to your question on, have we done more of a deep dive on this? We kind of haven't. It's probably popped up in drills a little bit over the last few years, but this most recent shout out was kind of a big step forward in what is usually such a boy choir area that is, sort of English children's choirs. So it was something we definitely wanted to bring into the conversation. We haven't done a ton of coverage on it happening in other spots. It has been, but once again, it's a tradition that I think traditions have their place, candidly, between you, me, and the doorstep. I think they do, but I think the opportunity to include children of any gender in this sort of high level training is really fantastic. And I'm very glad that places are starting to do it. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater necessarily and get rid of all of those traditions. But in places where they have these really high levels of scholarship and opportunity, I think it's really wonderful to have children of all genders be able to be included, which is why we were so excited about it. And in terms of having a female voice on the show, thank you. Same, back at ya. Love having female listeners. Also, my male listeners, you are also lovely as well. All of America is welcome to listen to Opera Box Score. But yeah, what about you two? What are you thinking about this whole progressivism in children's choir settings?
Well, I think it's, generally I think it's, it's a very exciting thing. I think a lot of the prestige that comes with these choirs is how old a lot of them are, particularly in places like England, where, just about every famous British male singer you've heard got their start in a choir like this. And sometimes from the same choir going back, 600 years or some crazy amount of time like that. There is certainly, it's kind of funny because I think here in the US, at least, I think that it's a lot harder to get men on board for not just opera singing, but the arts in general. So I do think there is certainly a place for boy-only choirs to sort of facilitate that sort of thing. But broadly speaking, when you're talking about these older institutions that have this pedigree and this oomph, when you say I sing for the, Westminster Boy Choir or whatever, that carries a lot more weight than a lot of other institutions that are more recent. So I think in my mind, it's about sort of taking in more people to this grand tradition, more than simply, give the girls a chance, I think it is a little bit of both, but I think that having that prestige not be limited to one gender is always going to be a good thing in my book.
Yeah, I haven't formed my opinion yet because I feel like there need to be places, that are safe for, some traditions, and I understand the tradition is exclusive. It's gone all the way around to being like, now it's so exclusive that it's sort of weird, and I think there are things need to be weird. But it's also, been a place where bad things can happen, where abuse can happen, like we, about, there are stories out there, of like what happens when you, have a thing that's just for boys and the types of, teacher or whatever that is attracted to that type of job. It's all sorts of lots of treacherous ways to talk about this. It's not easy to talk about these things without, dipping into some kind of, there's problems here,
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, well, I think there's sort of two I think another thing to think about when you're just even diving into this topic at all is the idea of regionalism, both in different regions within the U.S., sort of urban versus rural, and the types of opportunities that are available, but even globally, when you look at the traditions from country to country and sort of the ideas of these boy choirs, these larger conversations about masculinity in general. So, she mentioned something in her note about, what if these opportunities were available to, girls like me or girls not like me? 100%. I think a lot of that access also comes down to the regionalism here in the United States and like what types of opportunities are available in, more populated areas versus more rural areas. The idea of an all boys religious choir would not have existed like in my rural area of Pope County, Arkansas, for example. But, in the more populated areas of major cities like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, yeah, absolutely a thing. So I don't think there's one specific way to slice it to be like the old way is bad and progressivism is good. It's not just that. But in this instance, with this one part of the world that has this rich tradition, I do appreciate the progressivism that's there.
And all that to say, Oliver Camacho hates women and is canceled.
He really needs to stop silencing me.
Let's go to the 2-minute drill.
This just in. The 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
Angelina Jolie will sing in the upcoming Maria Callas film that's set to premiere later this week at the Venice Film Festival. Jolie said that she actually learned how to sing from scratch over the course of 6 months to prepare and portray the legendary soprano. And director Pablo Larraín revealed that Callas' voice has been mixed with Jolie's in the final cut of the film.
International Theatre Amsterdam has cut all ties with Belgian director Ivo van Hove, who led the company as artistic director for more than 2 decades. An independent report recorded a culture of fear under Van Hove, including multiple reports of an alleged assault, bullying, and intimidation that allowed to run rampant under his leadership. Van Hove said the breakup with ITA was, quote-unquote, mutual.
Sure, Jan. Brazilian stage director and lighting designer Caetano Villela has accused Teatro Colón of breaching his employment contract and failing to pay him. Quote, "I paid for my plane ticket out of my pocket," said Villela in a social media post. "I didn't know that I was literally paying to do work, since I still haven't received my salary to this day." Villela went on to say that he believes that the decision not to pay was, quote, "deliberate," as they continued to produce despite knowing about the pre-election budget cuts, and that, quote, "many foreign artists have not yet received their payments. Donate to OBS now so we can hire a lawyer so we can talk about this story."
And speaking of Teatro Colón, Buenos Aires Minister of Culture Gabriela Ricardas has fired the company's general director, Jorge Tellerman. Local news reported tensions between the director and the minister since Tellerman's appointment in 2022. Former ballet dancer Julio Boca has been named as his successor, a decision which Ricardas said would make the, quote, "traditionalists of the Colón rest easy and be happy."
In more firing news, Slovak National Theatre General Manager Matej Durlička was dismissed by the country's right-wing culture minister, Martina Simkovičová. Simkovičová cited the GM's political activism and a preference for foreign singers over domestic ones. Opera Europa has condemned the firing.
Music tech company Make Music has revealed that they are shuttering their music notation software program, Finale. The move will likely kick off a troubling period for composers and arrangers worldwide. Make Music is recommending customers move to Dorico, a competing software, and has arranged for any Finale owners to qualify for a significant discount. In short, check on your composer friends as they are not okay.
The group text today, y'all, with the upset composers in my phone, let me tell you. Anna Netrebko's lawsuit against the Met was narrowed to gender discrimination claims by a federal judge. Allegations of defamation, breach of contract, and discrimination because of national origin were dismissed. The decision was hailed by the Met as a positive turn in the case, saying in a statement that the company, quote, "strongly believes that the fourth claim will also prove to be without merit should it go to trial."
Countertenor and friend of the show, Jakub Josef Orlinski, has received the Gold Gloria Artist Medal for Merit in Culture from the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage of Poland. "Yesterday was one of those days that I'll remember till the end of my life," said Orlinski. "They took me by surprise and, well, All that was left to do was to accept the medal and cry a bit.
While Jakob was receiving a very Polish award, Erlen Wallen was busy receiving an extremely British honor. The composer was appointed Master of the King's Music, the first such appointment by King Charles III. Quote, "I am thrilled to accept this royal appointment," says Wallen. "I look forward to championing music and music making for all."
In trade news, the Monteverdi Choir and English Baroque soloists have announced that Christophe Rousset will conduct the ensemble's upcoming Christmas tour. The announcement comes weeks after John Elliott Gardner finally stepped down in the wake of punching a singer a year ago.
Greg Carpenter, artistic and general director of Opera Colorado, has announced his upcoming resignation to take effect at the end of the 24-25 season. Meanwhile, the Royal Swedish Opera has named a brand new artistic director, Tobias Theorell, who will begin his tenure next year. He succeeds the late Michael Cavanaugh.
Exit stage right, German opera director Christoph Nell has died at the age of 80. Nell directed operas at such theaters as the Bayerische Staatsoper, Oper Frankfurt, and the Hamburg Staatsoper. Among the productions he directed were Der Freischütz, Falstaff, Tristan und Isolde, and Die Frau ohne Schatten, and much, much more.
Italian soprano Celestina Casapietra has died at age 85. She was a member of the Berlin State Opera from 1965 to 1993 and appeared at leading European opera houses. She performed a wide range of repertoire from coloratura roles to Wagner's Elsa in Lohengrin and Giordano's Maddalena in Andrea Chenier, which she recorded on DVD alongside Franco Corelli.
And on this day, August 26th, first performances include Domenico Cimarosa's Le Astuzie Femminili in 1794. Gaspare Spontini's Gli Elist Delusi in 1800. Two by John Barnett. You never even heard of John Barnett, did you? The Picturesque in 1831. And The Mountain Sylph, also on this day in 1834.
Household names.
Then we have two by Rutland Boughton. In 1914, his The Immortal Hour premiered. And then in 1922, Alcestis, both premiering in Glastonbury.
Somewhere out there, we have a British opera superfan who is losing their minds, and it's just one person.
Birthdays include baritone Hippolyte Pryanichnikov, who created the role of Lionel in Tchaikovsky's The Maid of Orleans, born in 1847. In 1867, it was the birth of Umberto Giordano. In 1887, Nicaraguan composer Luis Delgadillo. In 1915, British composer Humphrey Searle. In 1920, Bulgarian-based Raffaele Arye, who created the role of True Love in Stravinsky's The Rake's Progress. In 1923, Wolfgang Sawallisch, the German conductor, was born. In 1939, English conductor Nicholas Braithwaite was born. And in 1947, maybe happy birthday to French baritone Philippe Duminy, who created the role of Léon in Messiaen's Saint François d'Assise, a bop.
And that is your 2-minute drill.
We get to hear from two birthday celebrants. Umberto Giordano, that was La Mamma Morta from his opera Andrea Chenier, performed by Celestina Casapietra. That performance from I don't know when it was, but she was still alive. The Orchestra Sinfonica di Milano della Rai, conducted by Bruno Bartoletti, 1973.
There we go. First try.
Got it.
Honestly, I'm just bummed you didn't play something from the Messiaen opera, which is, as you said, a bop. You know what's not a bop is this culture of fear that was under Ivo van Hove. Of course, Van Hove is known outside even the opera world. He also won some Tonys. He's directed quite a bit of stuff. Very big name in the international theater world. And of course, obviously touched on quite a few operas internationally as well. As far as I can tell, he doesn't seem to have been directly accused of anything illegal directly. But he certainly did not seem to be preventing a lot of things from happening, including an incident where one performer was grabbed by the throat by someone else and allegedly.
It's not great.
It is. This is, like John Elliott Gardner, this is another case of, a really big luminary in certain parts of the arts and the opera world. Really, taking a big fall. Every time something like this happens, I'm like, okay, is this the last big name we'll see fall?
No, absolutely not. No, it's, it's definitely one of those things where if there is this big culture of all of these egregious acts, if you can pin them on one person, you do, and you take that person to task. If it is this rampant history of it happening with many people, we're gonna cut the head off the snake so that we can, sort of start anew. And I think this is definitely a situation of the latter. So even if none of this can be tied directly back to Van Hove, if you're the boss when all this happens, it happens on your watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely. It's a real shame. We'll see what happens. We'll see how this affects his career going forward as well. Will it be a situation where he doesn't get any work, or will it be a situation a la Placido Domingo where he just finds a place that will hire him? We'll find out. I think the subtitle of this episode should probably be Revenge of the Culture Ministers. That's my pitch, because Teatro Cologne and the Slovak National Theater, they're coming for these general directors. No one is safe.
No, thank you. It's wild to have these things sort of happening back to back in very different places. And to have, the Cologne culture ministers say that the traditionalists and the purists will be happy and rest easy with this new hire. It's like, ouch, burn, sick burn.
It's wild to me how similar these stories are. And we missed a 2-minute drill last week, but it seems to have happened just a couple of weeks apart here. In both cases, you have a more conservative, right-wing leaning culture official who is known for austerity, slashing budgets, disapproving of someone trying to go out there and make new audiences with edgier work, or in the case of Slovakia, apparently, having the audacity to hire non-Slovakian singers. It's really interesting. There is a trend. I feel like, I think I've said this before, where here in the United States of America, we are so used to our artists and our artistic administrators having absolutely no power whatsoever, and no one in politics even taking an interest in it. But in countries where, there's still a much greater emphasis on state funding, state connections, these things can get political with a capital P, you see, especially with, right-wing governments really trying to rein in a lot of, if not left adjacent, or at least not towing the party lines kind of thing getting bumped out. This is not the first time we've seen this, but it's just weird that it happens within a week of each other.
I am going to not talk any more politics because I've already talked about politics this week on this episode. But I will talk about something that is a big bummer, and that is the end of finale.
The finale of finale, if you will.
Was that a sound effect that you tried to?
It's the Chopin funeral march.
Ashley is literally holding up her phone to the to the microphone, which is why the audio sounds terrible, but it's okay. Yes, the finale of finale is certainly something. If you are not a composer, there are a few major notation softwares out there. If your image of a composer is Beethoven, slashing, ink across a page, we don't do that anymore. We use various softwares now. We're in the 21st century. We have Dorico, Finale, rest in peace. Sibelius, also rest in peace, even though it's still around. And MuseScore, I believe, are kind of the four big ones. And the fall of Finale is kind of dramatic. And I do think the implications are really stark. Ashley, you were saying that you were getting a bunch of texts from all your composer friends.
Oh, man. Oh, well, because, yeah, I have had, a nice little career for myself in new music. And I have a lot of people that have become friends over the years that are composers. And, sort of when we were coming up through the ranks in music school, sort of the two big guys were, first was Finale. Finale was like the OG. Finale was there. Yeah. Short on its tail was Sibelius. And then those kind of became the two camps, like Finale v. Sibelius. Both of them had a cost attached to them and were an investment. And for broke music students, you were abusing the copies that you got from music school until those ran out. And then MuseScore became more of a thing because it's a little bit, at one point it was free. I can't remember if it is.
It is free anymore. Now, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of like younger or people just without the financial means to invest in software will often use MuseScore. But Finale was kind of the OG on the block. It was the one that most people learned first. And at one point there was an Allegiance Mac versus PC Finale versus Sibelius. I don't really think that's a thing anymore, but that's how it used to be. Yeah. And so the fact that the company with the D, what's it called?
Dorico.
Yeah.
That's kind of the newest kid on the block. But again, when brand new software gets created, it often gets to live on the legacy and the mistakes learned and made by its predecessors. So, odds are it's probably going to be a little bit more user-friendly. But yeah, the composers in my life it's a house divided. There's some people that are like, well, I'm fine because all I ever use is Sibelius. And then some people, their entire composing career has been in Finale. And Finale, it's like, there's going to be so much software and document conversion happening over the next weeks, months, year, just to preserve these people's creations.
And I can't emphasize enough the learning curve on switching to a new piece of music notation software.
Oh my God.
This is, if you've never tried to compose a notation software before, it is hard. And each version is different. The muscle memory just doesn't apply sometimes. It can take years to get to a point where you're even halfway competent. Yeah. And this also reflects kind of like, my what I will grandly term my Apple classical criticism, right? Is like we do take on these new aspects of technology because technology will continue to advance. There are advantages to using digital only media. But when you have situations where you have huge swaths of composers all using the same software and the company goes under for no fault of the composers, you can genuinely have a real hit in a very real, palpable, artistic way. Luckily, we have, several competitors who are around, and MuseScore, in addition to being free, is also, I believe, open source. So it's a little bit more resilient than a lot of these for-profit companies are. But certainly, this is a problem that could recur again and have, future implications if we lose a lot of our big, important, notation software out there.
There's also a note, dear listeners, in our Hot Takes notes that's a mini rant on Anna if Ashley wants it. Ashley doesn't want it. Ashley's just going to wait to see what other things the federal court judge
let's try not to keep her in the news every week if possible.
We're done with her. However, who's not usually in our talkbacks is Angelina Jolie, who is playing Miss Mary Callis. And so what's really cool is the director, Lorraine, mentions when we listen to Maria Callas in her prime during the film, most of that sound is going to be Callas, like 90 to 95%. And then when we listen to Callas as she gets older and in the present, almost all of that is going to be Angelina, and the singing is going to be Angelina. So I think that's going to be so cool to hear like the differences in sort of the recordings that made this woman famous and the voice that made this woman famous versus, someone who is, living and closer to sort of the age and part of the career where Collis would have been. So it was very exciting. And also just for our lawyers and our legal team, Angelina did not, in fact, swallow a tapeworm. That was a joke. That is satire. I just want to make sure our legal ops team does not get that flagged for us.
Angelina, please come on our podcast and correct the record on that one. Let's wrap this show up.
Good call. Bad call. On Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call. That's how we end the show over here at Opera Box Score. Let's start with you, Oliver.
Well, we are in that dead zone of the opera season where, all the summer stuff is over and fall stuff doesn't begin for a couple other weeks. So maybe it is time to actually explore some of our streaming options. And a friend of the show, Kenny, pointed out to us that really cool Tales of Hoffmann, which stars all the friends of the show, Benjamin Bernheim, Catherine Lewick, Kate Lindsay, and Christian Van Horn in the principal roles. That's available on Stage Plus, which is a streaming service that shows you all sorts of shows. This one from Salzburg Festival. I don't know how much it costs, but I want to see that, so maybe I'm going to invest in that and tell you about it.
Ashley Hardgrave.
Once again, I am still sort of on a bit of a DNC hangover, so I'm just glued to my couch so that I don't have to move or think. And what I've been doing is catching up on the awesome HBO Max, or Max, depending on where you are, series Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. I've been playing catch up and watching the last couple of months of episodes, and they are funny, they are insightful, they're frankly a little bit depressing, but it's all stuff that we as news consumers should know, and they do really great, accurate deep dives with a nice twist of absurdity and humor. And so if you're looking for something to just giggle a little and learn at the same time and have a lovely British man, tell you depressing things, cannot recommend Last Week Tonight enough.
That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, get your voice heard, and find links to stuff we've talked about at our website, operaboxscore.com. That's also where you can put your money where our mouths are and give back to the OBS using the Support the Team tab. Your announcer is Norm Woodell, your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho, and your audio editor is me. For co-host Ashley Hardgrave with guest Nicole Heaston, I am Weston Williams, asking you to continue the conversation about opera without pissing off your local culture ministers. We're back with an all-new show next week when we go Inside the Huddle with Missy Mazzoli. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more welcoming new episodes as you welcome the flowers in spring. Join us.